Hey y'all! Welcome back to the fam. If it's your first time here, big shout out to you. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out. The Houthis tried to hit a US aircraft carrier. Big mistake. Yeah man, it's been a rough 3 weeks for the Houthis, and it's about to get way worse. Their capital felt like it got rocked by an earthquake. Dozens and dozens of heavy, precision-guided bombs dropping right on target. It was a loud and clear message.
And just now, Trump pulled a wild move. The U.S. is keeping 2 aircraft carriers stationed in the Middle East. The USS Harry S. Truman is going to hang around for at least another month, and the USS Carl Vinson is rolling in to join the party.
So why is this a big deal? Well, put simply, together they could wipe the Houthis off the map. Trump posted on Truth Social saying the Houthi terrorist groups will be completely wiped out. And to really get what that means, you've got to understand just how powerful these carriers are. Here's the deal. US aircraft carriers are the backbone of American global power. They're like massive floating air bases that can pull up near enemy coasts or anywhere else in the ocean and strike from there. Most places on the planet, they can hit them in under 2 weeks. That kind of speed blows ground forces out of the water, literally and figuratively. These carriers aren't just for show either. They support bombing missions like what's going down in Yemen right now, or just flex naval dominance.
The jets on board can hit targets hundreds of miles away. So the real question isn't where they can strike, it's where can't they? Don't forget, over 80% of the world lives within 300 miles of a coast. Another big thing, carriers are always on the move, making them way harder to hit than a regular airbase.
But yeah, they're crazy expensive. We're talking billions to build one, because they got to be massive to work as real-deal air bases. Take the USS Gerald R. Ford, the biggest carrier ever built. It's like 1,100 feet long, over 300 meters, displaces around 100,000 tons fully loaded. That kind of size lets it carry dozens of planes on the deck, and even more below in the hangars, up to 90 aircraft in total.
Jets take off from a special launch zone at the front, called the bow, which is about 300 feet, 100 meters long. Sounds big, but still way shorter than most commercial runways, which are 25 to 40 times longer. So they use a catapult system to launch heavy aircraft at high speeds. Landing's no joke either. Traditional carriers have an angled deck in the back where planes land using a tailhook that catches a wire to stop them fast. If they miss the wire, they just hit the gas and take off again without crashing into anyone. That whole system, catapult launch and wire arrest landing, is called catabar. Super effective, but expensive as hell. That's why not every carrier uses it.
Some cheaper carriers use a ski jump ramp to help planes take off, but those planes got to be lighter, so they carry less fuel and fewer weapons. And many of those carriers don't even bother with complex landing systems. Instead, they use vertical landing planes, like the F-35B, which are part of the STOVL system. Short takeoff, vertical landing. STOVL is easier on the wallet and shrinks the size of the carrier, sometimes by half. The US doesn't technically call these ships carriers, but under international law, they count as such if they launch real aircraft.
Now, there's a ton of variety in the jets used. Most carriers roll with fighter planes for air dominance and precision strikes. Common US models are the F/A-18 Super Hornet and the F-35C or F-35B for STOVL ships. Other countries have their own, like France's Rafale M, Russia's MiG-29K and China's J-15, and the number of jets on board, that really depends. Some carriers carry as few as 18 planes, others pack nearly 50. But the real number that matters, sorties per day. How many times those jets can launch in 24 hours. Some carriers can only handle 30, while others do 100 plus daily. That massively changes how much combat power a carrier brings to the table. And it ain't just fighter jets. A lot of carriers also carry helicopters like the SH-60 Hawk or the AW-101 Merlin, which are crazy useful too. Submarines, anti-ship defense, and fleet support, the real MVPs behind the scenes. Alright, everyone always hypes up the fighter jets, but let's not forget the helicopters. They handle all kinds of crucial stuff like sub-hunting, anti-ship missions, surveillance and transport. Basically, they keep the whole fleet running safe and smooth. Then you've got other key aircraft like early warning planes, for example the E-2 Hawkeye. These bad boys can detect enemy jets, ships, missiles, you name it. And don't sleep on electronic warfare jets like the EA-18G Growler. They jam enemy radar, comms and weapon systems, super clutch in modern naval warfare.
Now get this. The US Navy is the only one with cargo planes on its carriers. The CMV-22B Osprey is the one doing the heavy lifting. It brings in spare parts, ammo, even new crew, fast. That's what keeps a carrier running for months at sea without needing to head back to base. But for the real heavy resupply, that's done by dedicated supply ships. Different navies have different setups. Some ships carry food, others haul ammo or fuel, and a few can do all three.
Fuel's a big deal too. Even though a carrier can hold millions of gallons of jet fuel, it burns through that fast during combat ops. They also gotta restock ammo every few weeks or months depending on the mission. And let's not forget about food. Fresh stuff runs out quick. Sure, there's refrigerated food on board, but new supplies need to come in weekly if possible. 'Cause you're feeding a lot of people. The number of people on a carrier, it can range from under 1,000 on the small ones to almost 6,000 on the big boys.
You've got two main crews, the air wing, pilots, mechanics, deck crew, all about flying and fixing jets. The ship's crew, totally separate, covers logistics, navigation, maintenance, etc. Deployments usually last about 6 months, and most crews sleep in cramped bunk beds with tiny lockers. Bathrooms, nothing fancy. Meals happen in a giant cafeteria called the mess deck, or the mess. They've got medical services on board too. Think dentist, pharmacist, and a full sick bay. There's even a chapel for religious services.
When they're off duty, the crew can chill in gyms, game rooms, watch TV, play video games, or hit up the library. There's even a small store and a barbershop on board. Officers live a little better. They get separate lounges, more spacious rooms, and private bathrooms. Now, moving a giant aircraft carrier around the world, that takes a ton of power. Most carriers run on conventional fuel, gas turbines, diesel engines, or steam turbines. But that gets expensive. That's why only the US and France roll with nuclear-powered carriers. They cost billions to build, but they've got massive advantages.
Nuclear carriers are faster, cruise at over 30 knots, that's 35 plus mph, and don't need to refuel for like 20 to 25 years. Meanwhile, conventional ships got to refuel every few days or weeks. But energy isn't the only thing carriers need. They also need to defend themselves because they're huge targets in wartime. We're talking missile strikes, drones, submarines, enemy jets, all coming for them. So carriers pack serious defences, long and short-range missile systems, rapid-fire guns, electronic jammers, and of course their own fighter jets that can shoot down threats or chase off subs. Some even have dedicated electronic warfare aircraft on board to jam incoming enemy systems during attacks.
The ships themselves are reinforced. Steel plating to absorb impacts, Kevlar around vital areas like the nuclear reactors, and the inside is divided into sections to contain fires. There are even specialized fire crews on board. Still, even with all that, a carrier's worth billions. So they never roll alone. That's why they roll deep, as part of a carrier strike group. That includes one or more guided missile cruisers, at least 2 guided missile destroyers, 1 or 2 nuclear attack submarines, usually classified. The carrier's the boss. Home of the Admiral, who commands the whole group. Cruisers come loaded with high-end radar and vertical launch systems. Over 100 missile cells ready to go.
Destroyers are the workhorses. Each has around 100 launch cells too, plus their own helies for extra support. So while aircraft carriers are out there doing their thing, subs that roll with them are also out hunting enemy submarines, and they can sneak up and take out enemy ships way more quietly than surface ships or aircraft. Now, other countries outside the US run different formations, but they are usually limited by how many cruisers and destroyers they've actually got.
All right, now that we've got a solid idea of how carriers work, let's rewind and talk about how they were used historically. The reason they're still considered a cornerstone of modern navies is all thanks to how successful they were in past wars. We're talking early 20th century and beyond. Back in the day, people started messing around with launching planes from ships. In 1910, aviation pioneer Eugene Ely pulled off the first ever plane takeoff from a ship, the USS Birmingham. 2 months later, he landed a plane on the USS Pennsylvania, setting another first. That was just the beginning.
During World War I, the idea of aircraft carriers started heating up as planes became more and more useful in battle. In 1917, a gutsy British pilot named Edwin Dunning became the first person to land a plane on a moving ship. Sadly, he died, trying it again, which just shows how risky this stuff was. Still, Britain stuck with it, and in 1919, right after WWII, they launched the first official aircraft carrier in the world, HMS Hermes. The rest of the world took notes real quick. Japan launched its own carrier, Hosho, which was the first to enter full service in 1922. That same year, the US commissioned its first carrier, the USS Langley. Honestly, it was basically a cargo ship with a runway slapped on top. But hey, it was a start.
People saw the potential, but after WWII, world powers tried to chill out on the naval arms race. That's where the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 came in, signed by the US, Britain, Japan, France, and Italy. They agreed to limit the size and number of battleships and carriers being built. This was reinforced again in the London Naval Treaty in 1930. But by the 1930s, tensions were back up, and the treaties kinda got ignored. Everyone started building again. By 1939, here's how things looked. UK 7 carriers, Japan 6, USA 5, France 1. Everyone was low-key breaking the rules, so those treaty limits didn't really matter anymore.
And when World War II kicked off, the world finally saw what aircraft carriers were really capable of. After the UK declared war on Germany in 1939, they started using carriers in the Atlantic and the North Sea. But they used them mostly for defense and support. German U-boats were out here wrecking ships left and right, but planes launched from carriers helped track them down and protect supply lines between the US and UK. Honestly, without their carriers, and especially without American help across the Atlantic, the UK might not have held on.
Carriers weren't just defensive either. One major win, planes from the British carrier HMS Ark Royal helped sink the German battleship Bismarck, one of the most advanced warships at the time. Still, Europe was just the warm-up act. Carriers really showed what they were made of in the Pacific theater. After Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, the US and Japan went at it across the Pacific, and carriers were the main event. The crazy thing? Pearl Harbor was only possible because of Japanese carriers. They launched bombers and fighters across the ocean straight from their decks.
Japan kept the momentum going, using carriers to help take over places like the Philippines, Malaysia, and the Dutch East Indies. Their dive bombers even sank the British HMS Hermes in the Indian Ocean. Yep, the world's first carrier became a casualty. But 1942 changed everything. That's when the Battle of Midway went down, one of the most legendary carrier-based battles ever. Japan sent 4 carriers trying to trap and destroy the US carrier fleet near Midway Atoll. But the US had cracked their plan and hit back hard, launching planes at just the right moment.
End result? The US sank all 4 Japanese carriers, taking out around 3,000 Japanese crew and pilots. It was a devastating blow. Japan never really bounced back after that. With air superiority and a growing carrier fleet, the US slowly but surely began the island-hopping campaign, taking back territory bit by bit. Japan, running low on trained pilots and modern carriers, turned to kamikaze attacks just to try and stop the American advance.
America's carrier game is still on another level. All right, let's talk about those 9 U.S. amphibious assault ships. Technically, they're not called aircraft carriers by the Navy, but the rest of the world definitely sees them that way. Why? Because they carry helicopters and F-35B fighter jets, and those bad boys can take off and land vertically. So yeah, they're still a serious threat.
Now here's the thing. No other country even comes close to the US when it comes to carriers. Like, not even in the same ballpark. Take China, for example, their closest rival. They've got 2 carriers in active service and 1 more in testing, but even the 2 they're using are way behind America's in terms of tech. In a real fight, they'd probably lose. Sure, the US still needs to keep an eye on China's next moves, and we'll get to that in a bit.
But let's look at the rest of the world for a sec. Countries like the UK, Italy, Japan, and India all have 2 carriers each. Meanwhile, France, Russia, Spain, and Thailand only have one. But here's the catch. It's not easy to compare them. A lot of those carriers are super limited. Like, some can only launch light aircraft because their ramps are tiny. Others are basically half the size of US carriers and can't carry nearly as many planes. Russia's carrier, it's not even operational anymore because of maintenance issues.
Then you've got countries like Australia, Brazil, Turkey and Egypt. Yeah, they've technically got carriers, but they can only launch helicopters or drones. No jets. So at the end of the day, the US completely dominates the aircraft carrier game. And that actually matters a lot right now. Honestly, you could argue that the most important job of the US Navy today is keeping the ocean safe and making sure global trade routes stay open.
It's kind of the unspoken deal behind American global power. People are cool with US dominance as long as America keeps the sea lanes open and everyone benefits. Think about it. The fact that you can order almost anything from almost anywhere in the world? That's insane. And it's all thanks to something people call the Pax Americana, the era of peace and open trade that kicked off after WWII and really took off after the Cold War. During that time, global trade exploded, and with it came major economic growth across the planet.
But every now and then, some US adversary tries to mess with that flow. That's exactly what happened in late 2023, when the Iran-backed Houthi militia in Yemen started hitting commercial and naval ships in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden. It turned into a full-blown crisis real quick, because about 15% of global trade passes through the Red Sea, and 30% of the world's consumer goods and containers rely on it. That stretch connects the Red Sea to the Suez Canal, which links Europe and Asia.
If ships have to go around Africa instead, it adds 10 to 14 days to the trip. Because of the attacks, shipping prices between Asia and Europe jumped 175 to 250%, since nobody trusted the Red Sea route anymore. That's a major inflation risk for Europe, and bad news for Asian exporters too. Now you might be thinking, why's the US even getting involved if it's not their problem?
Well, surprise, we actually know the backroom reasoning. Because some signal chat messages from inside Trump's team got leaked. Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks basically said it's not just about the Houthis, it's about freedom of navigation, which is a core national interest, and it's also about rebuilding US deterrence that she said got weakened under Biden.
Then National Security Advisor Michael Waltz chimed in, saying it didn't matter whether it was now or later. At some point, the US would have to reopen those shipping lanes. But on that same chat thread, J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley were like, yo, we're not bailing out Europe again. Let them pay the bill this time. Here's the deal. The US is really the only country that can protect global shipping lanes, since it's the only one with a carrier fleet big enough to do it.
But there's a twist. The US isn't super hyped to keep protecting trade that doesn't directly benefit it anymore. Trump advisor Stephen Miller even dropped a message saying, basically, if we're going to spend all this money reopening the lanes, we better get something out of it. So, long story short, that's why US carriers are rolling into the Middle East right now to deal with the Houthis. And yeah, it'll probably turn into another success story that shows just how essential the US carrier fleet still is. But don't get it twisted, this won't be easy. According to the Navy, the combat they're seeing in Yemen is the most intense they've faced since World War II. Thanks a ton for watching the video. Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more real news. This is X News, where we keep it raw and real. See you all next time. Take care out